Scott, are these earnings from Google enough to silence all of the skeptics?
Well, Eric, it's great to be with you this morning. The short answer is no, not all the skeptics, but I think a lot of people were very pleased with what they heard, not only from the company, but as you pointed out, more specifically, Larry Page.
Well, let's go back to Larry Page for a moment, because how much of the credit for what would appear to be a bit of a turnaround in Google's momentum should go to Page? People want to focus on Page. He's the new man in the CEO's chair, or at least back in the CEO's chair. Can you really give him that much credit, or was this stuff that are we just seeing the follow-through from things that Eric Schmidt put in place?
Well, I think he deserves some of the credit in the context of two things. Number one, I think the fact that the company continued to roll out new offerings, new products that to some extent have gained a fair amount of attention, interest, and adoption. That, I think, is largely due to Larry Page. He's been in the CEO's chair for about, let's say, 3 months at this point. The second thing, which is, I think, really important, is when Page came in, there were a lot of questions. How would he run the company? What kind of spending discipline would he employ? You guys just ran a good quote that he offered about the fact that spending discipline remains in place. And while I think he got some criticism for the prior conference call and his participation in it, he deserves a lot of credit for how he handled himself during last night's call.
Scott, that said, search is still the business through which Google generates almost all of its revenue. At what point do things like Android, Google Plus, Chrome, start to become meaningful businesses from a revenue and profit standpoint?
Well, the interesting thing, Eric, is that a lot of those businesses are already starting to contribute. I think the challenging thing for Google is that a lot of times those businesses simply feed on search activity and related advertising. And so when you see acceleration in revenue growth to 32% for the quarter, and this is not a company that did a tremendous number of acquisitions of size over the last couple of quarters or years, one must ask what has changed fundamentally at the company where we see such a tremendously sized firm accelerating its revenue growth from such a large base. The answer is investment in a lot of these new offerings are starting to bear fruit.
Scott, a quick question for you before we go. I noticed that the revenue from Google's partner sites, like, say, the New York Times, rose only half as fast as revenue from Google's own sites. Is that a bit of a red flag?
You know, Eric, that's actually been a trend for some time where Google's proprietary sites are notably outgrowing those of its partners. It's something to keep an eye on, but this is not something that's so different than what we've seen, not only over the last couple of quarters, but frankly, over the last couple of years. It actually contributes to a much greater margin profile for the company going forward.
Scott, great to have you on the Inside Track. Scott Kessler, an analyst at Standard & Poor's. He covers Google. He rates this stock a strong buy, and his enthusiasm and optimism was borne out by the numbers the company reported last night.